And just to end this section, it might be clearer to use the term there was that an effect was detected or it wasn't, because you're essentially trying to detect real effects if you're doing statistical testing. So whether you detect a correlation or not, it might help also to frame your own mind into thinking about whether what is it that the statistical test actually tells you. Before doing a statistical test, you should prepare for reporting it, and it is also how I try to think about this is that for myself, it's okay to make errors as long as you're doing them transparently, because that gives the opportunity for things to be corrected later on. And if you're not being transparent in your research, then there won't be the opportunity to use your data later and or correct some mishaps that took place during the analysis. So it might be that it turns out to be completely worthless, or even worse than that, misleading. And something to think about is this is called the 21-word solution, where they say that this should be included in all papers that says we report how we determined our sample size, all data exclusions, all manipulations, all measures in the study. So this all measures in the study, for example, it would be to counter doing a form that asks for about 50 different things, and then just reporting the two variables that showed a connection in the paper. And so here is a very coming back to Richard Feynman that we spoke about in the first week. Something you might want to consider is asking yourself, which factor observation would make me change my mind and act differently? Where could I go and look for it? Because as unintuitive as it is to actually try to prove yourself wrong, when you're doing scientific work, it's very, very important, and it's much nicer to prove yourself wrong than have someone else prove you wrong. And if you're interested, there's a slide deck here. It's about halfway through. It's much of the same things we've discussed here, but it has some additional materials that you might find interesting. I'll just very briefly go through some additional things that might be worth mentioning. We're going to talk about anti-fragility later, but unrelated to that, we have there is a test called GRIM, or test called SPRITE, and this is an interesting test because it's so extremely simple. So it tries to find out whether the results that are reported in a table, for example, whether they are mathematically possible. And the basis is that if you take an average of two variables, the average or two people in one variable, so it can either be something 0.5 or something 0.0. So it's impossible for the mean of two Likert type scores to be 2.25 or something like this, because there are two scores. And if you have three scores, it could be 0.0, 0.333, 0.66, and so forth. And you can naturally build a matrix about all the possible results. And you can then look at whether published papers can actually contain mistakes or mathematically impossible averages in their reporting. And this was also something I found out in this blog post that I wrote. So this is a very famous experiment in social psychology. A couple of years ago, it had more than 3,000 citations. It's presented in all the textbooks, but I ran the test on this the main results table of this experiment, and there are like 3 of these results are actually mathematically impossible if you have a 20 participants in these experimental conditions. Some fun tools. There's something called the stat check, and there's an app called p-checker where you can put in p-values that you write in that you find in a paper, or in stat check you can actually insert your own paper or someone else's paper and find out whether the results are whether the p-values that come out of what they say the statistical results are, whether they are correct. It's a bit more complicated but than that, but anyway, you might want to check it out. And here's a reading list if you're interested. You'll find these in the slides that you get. Maybe the last thing to mention is that when you leave the university and you don't have any more access to scientific journals, if the papers that you're interested in are not available in a preprint server, you might never get to see those papers anymore because you would need to pay for them. And something that people have been using is called the Sci-Hub, and this is very bad for scientific publishing because it's a pirate site for scientific publications, and just out of your educational interest, there is a WordPress site that shows these different domains and how fast they are. So don't go checking it out, but you need to know that this thing also exists.